We talk all things LA Kings with former player and analyst Daryl Evans on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years, the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. We are happy to bring in friend of the show, former Kings player, current Kings analyst, Daryl Evans, to join us to talk about the LA Kings, and we are always appreciative of his time. Daryl, how are you? Hey, Daryl, how are you?
Hi, Eddie. I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for your time. Always appreciate that, and getting a chance to talk about the LA Kings with you. Since we have last spoken, the Kings have decided on a new head coach. It's somebody that we are familiar with. Jim Hiller gets the interim tag removed. He is now the Kings head coach going forward. I wanted to ask you, certainly, what were your thoughts on the decision of the Kings to keep Jim Hiller?
Well, I think it's a good decision. I think the time that Jim spent with the team last year under the head coach position, I thought he did a really good job. He took a team that was playing poorly and turned them around. They got themselves into the postseason. Be it they didn't have the success they wanted, I thought he did a really good job at really getting a good feel for the team and utilizing the players in the fashion that he did. And I think now that he has the position in place for the next few years, I think it really gets him a chance to take ownership of this hockey club and really instill the things that he wants to. He'll have all summer to be able to put it together with the coaching staff. And then when it comes training camp, the message will be loud and clear. And I think that was pretty evident when he and Rob Blake had the press conference the day that they introduced Jim as the new head coach moving forward.
I'm sure in your playing career, at the different levels you played, you were in situations where there were coaching changes. I'm not sure if you were ever in a situation where an interim coach was then promoted to the full-time coach, but what do you think the benefits are of doing that kind of a thing?
Well, there's a few benefits, and one being that even when he stepped in from an associate coach to an interim coach, he was already familiar with the players. So that's a good step right there. And then as a head coach, he had an opportunity to be able to see the way guys would act in certain situations and be able to dictate the responsibilities for the coaching staff. So I think those are advantages moving forward. He's very familiar with the team, and the team's very familiar with him. They know his style of coaching. I think it's going to be a little firmer moving forward, but there's a greater expectation. Again, there wasn't a happy person in the organization at the end of the year after making the playoffs and then getting beaten the first round by the Edmonton Oilers. That just left a real bad taste, and it's something that everybody's looking forward to getting back to training camp. And I think the attitude that Jim will bring, along with his coaching staff and a couple of tweaks in their systems, will put them in a better position to move forward and find a way to succeed when it comes April and May next year.
Now, they talked about in the press conference implementing a more aggressive offensive style while still not losing the identity of being a strong defensive team. How much of a challenge is that going to be? How can you be a more aggressive offensive team without sacrificing things defensively?
Well, I think there's enough players on the team that have been around enough. They understand the importance of playing defensive hockey and the advantages of it. I think defensive hockey, that's when you don't have the puck. When you get the puck, that's when you go on the attack, and that's when the switch kind of, you switch over. You've got to turn to a different gear. I think the Kings, the young players, guys like Byfield, we saw spurts through the course of the year. LaFerriere, he did a good job. Again, another young player. But I think collectively as a group, with the experience that they gathered as a group, and maybe having a guy like Brandt Clark that they expected to light up next year, that should generate a little bit more offense, put a little bit more offensive flair in their game, that they'll be more aggressive in that regard. and they've got to get out of their comfort zone. Both Rob Blake and Jim Hiller talked about it. They've got to play uncomfortable. You've got to go to those hard areas. You've got to take a whack in order to make a play. The talent is there. The personnel is there. They just have to execute a lot more efficiently than they did. And I think they learned a lot in the series against the Edmonton Oilers about getting inside and into those hard areas. So 5-on-5 collectively as a group, you want to defend as they did. Unfortunately, the power play went in the wrong direction in the postseason, as did the penalty kill. I thought it was really a series that was lost by special teams, but more aggressive style. I think will be embraced by the players. Let's face it, every player growing up, you don't dream about being a great checker. Everybody wants to put the puck in the net. Everybody wants to high five. Everybody wants to score that game-winning goal. Well, they're going to be encouraged to do a little bit more of that kind of stuff moving forward. Again, when you don't have the puck, you take care of everything back in your own end. When you get it, the green light is there, and that means all 5 guys on the ice, you get involved and do whatever you can to put the puck in the net at the other end.
I know Jim Hiller still has an assistant coach to hire, so his staff isn't quite finalized yet, but clearly he's putting together a game plan. As you mentioned, once the team gets together, and we don't know exactly the makeup of the team, but there are certain players we know are going to be back and are going to be a part of the Kings going forward. How long do you think it will take for him to implement a new system and for the players to be accustomed to it? Is it something that will have to be transition when the season starts, or do you think there's enough time in training camp and preseason that they'll have a pretty good grasp on it by the time the regular season gets going?
I think they should have a pretty good grasp come the regular season. I don't think it's going to be a real drastic type of change. And because most of the personnel is going to be the same, I think the transition will be relatively smooth. It's going to take a little bit of time. Everybody over the course of summer, even the teams that win the Stanley Cup, there's always a transition getting ready for the next season. You've stepped away from the game, the intensity backs off, and that's something that continues to build through the course of the year. But I think the basics are going to be there. The foundation will be in place, and it'll be something that, they may massage a little bit in the early part of the season. They might have to tweak a couple of things, even though they're going to think about it all summer and put it in place, as they get into the season and see exactly what the personnel that they have. And let's face it, certain guys are maybe going to step up and, have better years than you expect them to have. And other guys might not, do what you want them to do. So that'll all have to be tweaked a little bit, but I think the foundation will be good. The structure will be good. It'll be a real aggressive 5-man unit. The same mentality that they take in defending, the same pride that they take in defending, that has to transition and happen when they have the puck. They've got to be the same way with the aggressiveness, and they've got to play real assertive offensively and do whatever it takes to put the puck in the net. We've definitely seen a growth over the last few years. Rob Blake's put together, some great players, bringing in guys like Arvidsson, Danault. You look at Fiala. Those guys have transitioned nicely. Now it's a matter of finding that next step. And the Kings are close. They're getting there, but unfortunately, it looks like they're a long ways away when you don't win in the postseason. So that'll be the ultimate goal. Start training camp. You still got to get there. It's not a given you're going to get into the postseason, but doing what they do at the beginning of the year, playing that way with consistency, will prepare them to be able to execute like that when it does come postseason time.
I did want to ask you about that because you even used the word close as well. Jim Hiller said that in his press conference that he thought the Kings were close. I know that's open to interpretation. He didn't really go into specifics. What do you mean when you think the Kings are close? What does that mean when it comes to playoff time?
Well, I think when you look at games, there are games that, you're right there, you're knocking on the door. I think the 1-0 game that the Kings lost on home ice on that power play goal against, that was the only goal of the game. I thought they had better chances in that game. I thought they deserved to win that game, and that puts it at a 2-2 series. But there are opportunities. Again, when you look at how lopsided the special teams were in that series against the Edmonton Oilers, where the Oilers get 9 power play goals and the Kings don't get any. Right off the bat, you just put those two statistics out, regardless of who the teams are. The people are probably going to tell you the team that scored the 9 power play goals and the team that didn't get any, that's probably the team that got beaten, the team that won. And I thought that was really clear. So that's no disrespect to the Kings penalty kill, which ranked number 2 through the course of the year. But they do have to make some adjustments. And unfortunately, they weren't able to do it during the series, that Edmonton just kind of really took advantage of them, and Kings gave them too much time and space. That'll change. the power play. They definitely missed Victor Arvidsson all year, not having that right-handed shot. I think like a guy like Laferriere will add to that next year. I would expect him to get some power play time. I think back in the blue line, when you look at Brandt Clark, his contribution, he's got he's got a hockey IQ that there's an element that they don't have on their power play right now. And being that he's still a young player and all that, he's going to continue to grow, but he's going to keep the opposition on their toes. So I think there'll be a little bit more creativity in it. And even a guy like Dubois, we saw some spurts through the course of the year that, he showed some really nice things. I think going with Team Canada really helped him out at the end of the season. And they need him to be a better player. And I think he's a guy that can be a difference in those games. Like if you look at Edmonton, that series against the Oilers, that's why Dubois was acquired. The Kings knew exactly what they were up against with the Oilers. They played them for 2 straight years prior, and they added the big piece up the middle. They didn't get the results they were looking for, but that's not to say that can't change moving forward. So need him to be an impact player moving forward. I think the coaching staff, led by Jim Hiller, will do a better job at giving him responsibility, maybe a little bit more ice time, and he's got to get himself prepared, ready to go. He wasn't happy with the year that he had. Kings weren't happy with the year that they have. Both expect better, and I would assume that they would get better when it comes training camp this year.
We'll have more with Daryl Evans and talk a little bit about next season for the LA Kings as well, and some of the players that may be stepping up and looking to contribute. We'll do that more here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. No matter how the latest game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through Indeed's time-saving tools like Instant Match, Assessment, and Virtual Interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of qualified candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer valid for the rest of the month. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon and claim your $75 credit before the end of the month. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. We've got more with Daryl Evans, former Kings player and current analyst. And Daryl, did want to talk to you about looking ahead to next season. I know that it was talked about in the press conference with Rob Blake that they're looking to maybe not make a lot of changes as far as bringing in additions from the outside, but some of the younger faces taking on a bigger role. You've mentioned his name a couple of times already. Let's start with defenseman Brandt Clark. What have you heard and seen about his first full season of pro hockey in Ontario? And does it appear that he's ready to make that jump to the NHL next season?
Yeah, nothing but good things. And with regards to Brandt Clark, I think at the end of the day, being down in Ontario as much as he was this year is probably a blessing in disguise. Let's face it, we all know he's good enough to play in the NHL. He was good enough to play probably even the year before that he could have stepped in, and a lot of teams would have loved to have had him on their roster. But being that he was able to be in Ontario, take a more prominent role on the ice time that he got, he played in all the critical situations. That was really good for him. The times that he came up, I think he showed growth in his game. But moving forward, he's a game changer. He's a difference maker. And for the one thing that the Kings really lack, that's the offensive flair in their game. He's a guy that can bring that, regardless of who he's on the ice with. The 5 players, that group, they're going to be able to create a lot more. He's not one of those guys that's looking to dump the puck in and, have guys go in and chase it. He's going to carry as much as he can, and he's going to try to get involved in the cycle in the offensive zone. So that'll make everybody better. Again, he's still a young player, but I think, he's got a really big ceiling. So offensively, the Kings, I think, just watching him, the way that he plays on the ice, even not in practice, the creativity that comes to him, I think that'll kind of trigger some things offensively for the Kings, and he should be a big part of their power play as well next season.
We saw a little bit of Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas this past year getting opportunities at the NHL level. Let's start with Turcotte. He got a few more games than Akil Thomas, 20 games to the Kings last season. What did you think about the time we saw with him, and can you see him getting more playing time at the NHL level this coming season?
Yeah, for him, definitely his best season, in the NHL as a professional player. I think the big thing with him was his health. He continues to mature. He's getting a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. And I think he's got a better understanding when he comes to the NHL that he doesn't have to go out there and put the big numbers up. Right now, it's playing the game the right way, earning the trust of his teammates, earning the trust of the coaching staff, and gaining respect from the opposition. And I think in a small sample size, he was able to do a lot of that this year. I think he has got a little bit more offensive flair to bring to the Kings. And that's not necessarily in a top six role, but his creativity could add to the bottom six. And that's an area where the Kings could use some of that depth scoring and spread things out. The Kings are at a stage right now with their veteran players, guys like, I'll go back to last year's roster with Kopitar and Trevor Lewis and Drew Doughty back in the blue line. They need these younger players to step up and take more prominent roles. I don't want to say they're willing to move aside, but they're expecting these guys to come in, and the coaching staff needs that. These young guys, they provide energy, especially over the course of a long season with the travel and that. These young guys, let's say if a Turcotte goes into Montreal or Toronto or Madison Square Garden to play their first game, these guys are wired for sound when they go into those buildings. So that you hope becomes contagious and spreads throughout the roster, and that's what he should be able to bring a little bit of that spark. He's a good skater. He's got a good hockey mind, and the Kings need him now. It's at that stage where he has to be a player in the NHL. So he's going to get a real solid look. Expect him to come to camp ready and raring, knowing that that job is probably on the table for him to lose as opposed to go out and take next year.
Akil Thomas had just a quick, brief show with the Kings, just 7 games, but he really jumped off the page in those 7 games. He had 3 goals. Not expecting him, if he gets more of a chance, to keep up that kind of a scoring rate, but it was pretty impressive to show that he did appear that he is a player that can play at this level. Do you expect him to get a bigger opportunity next season?
I do, and again, for him, a lot like Turcotte, both have had trouble staying healthy as professionals. He's had some surgeries. He came in with the right mindset, and he took advantage of it. There's no doubt over the last couple of years, he's been chomping at the bit, looking for the opportunity to play his first game, and he stepped right in there. And I like the way that he played within his means. He didn't do anything fancy to go out and score those goals. It was his work ethic. He gained more confidence the more he played. Again, he's a feisty type of player. An element that he brings to the Kings lack a little bit of in their forward group is a right-handed shot. The ability to be able to take some face-offs and things like that. That'll pay to his advantage as well, or play to his advantage. And again, is this a depth guy to start out? I mean, expect him to come in and be a top 6 forward. I don't think that's the situation. But if you add guys like Turcotte and now Akil Thomas, if they end up in the bottom 6 and they're able to contribute, bring a little bit of flair, pick up the pace of the game, that's going to help the balance of the Kings out and make them more difficult to play against night in and night out.
Quinton Byfield, actually younger than Alex Turcotte and Akil Thomas, but he's played almost 200 NHL games, took a huge step forward this past season, did hit a bit of a wall maybe over the last quarter of the season or so. But is it realistic to expect him to take another big step forward next season, or should we maybe kind of step back and kind of temper our expectations for Quinton next year? Or are we ready for him to kind of take another big step?
Yeah, I think the Kings are, they're hoping for another big step. If it's as big a step as this past season, I can't tell you that. I still think there's a long way to that ceiling for him. I think they're still probably determining where he's going to end up playing. Is he going to be a winger? Is he going to be a centerman? But I think the versatility in his game, I think he's rounded his game out a lot better, more compete in his game, winning puck battles, winning the battles along the boards. I think when you look at his lull in the season, that kind of came when the Kings went a little bit cold there in January when they had a real tough spell, and he wasn't able really to get back on top of his game like he had in the early part of the year. But the good sign was that in the first half of the season, the consistency that he played with, the guys love to play with him. Again, he's playing a lot of the different critical situations, taking some draws. He's going to continue to keep working on that. And now it's just a matter of, the coaching staff, management, trying to find, combinations, whether he stays on the line with Kopitar and Kempe, or, we've seen him a couple of times playing, with Dubois. is that a combination that might work moving forward? Doesn't matter which one's in the middle of the ice or who's on the wing, but I think are some real creative options that he can really help out. He will get stronger. He'll continue to keep working on his skating. And let's face it, he had a lot of fun. It was a lot more fun being involved and playing on the offensive part of the game and contributing like he did as opposed to the year before. And he wants to keep moving forward. I think reaching that 20 goal plateau, at the end of the year there, that was a big boost for him. And that should really encourage him to work that much harder this offseason and be ready to go when the season starts. I expect him to take on a more prominent role, and I expect his statistics to jump up as well.
All right, a little bit more with Daryl Evans coming up. I'm going to ask him a little bit about his role that he plays on the broadcast and maybe some of the things that he has seen down there on the ice level. We'll do that more here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Now, we don't have to, we don't get an opportunity to bet on the Kings or the Lakers or the Clippers, but we can bet against the teams that beat our teams, like the Oilers and the Mavericks. And of course, the Dodgers are in first place, playing well, favorites to win it all. It is still a great time of the year to be a sports fan, and you can be even more fun by winning with FanDuel. You can bet on who will win, who will lose, and things like how many home runs Shohei Ohtani will hit this year. You can do it all with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're wrapping it up with Daryl Evans, former Kings player and analyst. And Daryl, I kind of opened it up to some of our listeners to see if anybody maybe had a question for you. And we did have a question from Mason. And he did say that you being down rinkside, he wanted to know what's the coolest thing you've ever seen, talking about maybe big hits or great goals. What you have a different perspective, obviously, being there down on the ice. Is there anything that stands out either from this past year or your time being down there from your perspective at ice level?
No, it's a unique experience down there, especially when you get down between the benches. Being a former player, and I tend to watch practices down at that level, so I understand the speed, the strength, the passion, and the compete they have in their game. At the practice level, but when you see it in a game, and you see some of the individual efforts that are put in. One that really stood out this year was the goal that Quinton Byfield scored against the Columbus Blue Jackets, that he went in and, looked like he was not only losing his stick, he was losing the puck, he was losing everything, and he finds a way to finish. It really does give you a great appreciation for the skill set of these players. But just a conversation between the players, listening to the comments from the coaching staff, you really do feel like you're involved in the game. I think I can bring a unique element to the broadcast from there. I think I was able to do that, and I think even alongside with Nick and Jim, that I think as at certain times during the year, we found a way to utilize that to to a higher degree, and something that as we move forward, I think we'll continue to find that comfort, and I'll be able to add things that I know, being up in the booth with Jim and Nick, where where they are, you just don't see or feel that from from where you are up there. So I think it really enhances the broadcast. Sometimes I'm down in the corner. Even a game like in Arizona when we were at the university, I was directly behind the net, and what an appreciation you have for a goaltender when you see the puck coming in from the slot at 90 plus miles an hour, and two or three players in front of him. Your eyes are the goalie's eyes, and you can't see the puck, and yet they still find a way to get themselves in front of it. So it's a great game. The speed of it, you have that much more respect, I think, from the players down there. And I really enjoyed my year down at ice level and working with Nick and Jim.
Well, you're very recognizable, obviously, with your flamboyant wardrobe as well. I'm sure you have some great interactions with the fans at home, but on the road, how does that work out sometimes? Are there ever any comments made or any interesting conversations you've had on the road around the NHL at all?
Yeah, I think, even when I was in the booth up top, I'd get comments and, on my suits and things like that. But now you get it from the players down there, and it's pretty neat when you get the players go by and warm up, and they come by and give me a thumbs up and say, "I really like that one. That one's really cool." So it's nice to engage with those guys. I have a lot of fun with it. I think it speaks to my my personality a little bit, and And like I say, I enjoy that part of it, but it does down there at ice level. Even some of the coaches, I'll get a comment from them. The referees will come over because sometimes we'll be putting their water bottle between the benches, and they'll go, "Yeah, that's a cool looking suit tonight." And so it's just little things like that. It's just you really do feel like you're part of the game down there.
Have you always been, into fashion when you were playing in the NHL? Were you, I'm not make quite probably as flamboyant as you are now, but have you always been interested in dressing well? And is that something that's always kind of been a part of your life?
I think going back to when I was a young player growing up, I remember getting my first three-piece suit. We didn't have a lot of money as a family, and I took a lot of pride when my mom and dad and were able to put that all together for me to get a three-piece suit. So I wore that with a lot of pride. I remember in the NHL when I was playing, at the time the fashion were the skinny ties, leather pants, wearing a fedora down in the minors and things like that. So I think it's always something that I've had a little bit of a of a soft spot for. And then when I was in a position where I was I was able to go out and pick out my own cloths and have my suits made, I have a lot of fun doing that. It's an experience when I go in there. And I know some of the combinations are probably a little bit out there for people, but I think it really does kind of speak as to who I am, and I think I've got a pretty lively personality and energy, and I think that my suits kind of describe that a little bit.
Well, hey, Daryl, it's always supposed to be fun. It is entertainment. I know we take it really seriously at times, but you certainly do keep it fun. And I've asked you to come on this show probably a half dozen times at least, and you've never said no. I just want to say, always appreciate you. Always appreciate your interactions with the fans, whether it's through shows like this or on social media. And by the way, you can follow him on X and Twitter at Daryl Evans 15, DARYL EVANS 15. So, Daryl, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for joining us here during the off season, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation as well.
Always a pleasure, Eddie. Keep up the great work. Have a great off season, and I know the Stanley Cup Finals are coming around, and that'll be down behind us soon. It's been some great hockey. The draft is coming up, and then free agency. So there'll be a lot to talk about when we have our next conversation. So stay healthy and well. And again, we'll look forward to talking to you soon, Eddie.
I look forward to it as well. Thanks, Daryl. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. That is Daryl Evans. And again, we always appreciate when he makes time for us here on Locked on LA Kings. If you are an everydayer and you watch and listen Locked on LA Kings every day, you know that we're still here for you 5 days a week during the off season. And that means every Friday we have our Kings fan feedback show. If you want to get in an email for that show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments if you're watching on the YouTube episodes as well. Love for you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked on LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching this episode of Locked on LA Kings, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.